you're going to have so many theories and so many perspectives on theory. But what you have to understand is the core idea. First and foremost, social process theories deal with this idea that you have an individual and how they think and how they feel and how they see the world, and then you have a social environment that's going to impact how that person is going to respond and react. So any social process theory, any theory that is labeled as a social process theory, is going to deal with the individual and how they feel and the environment that they're interacting in on a regular basis. So that's what we're talking about, how the social environment can impact the individual and how there's a relationship between the two. There's a strong relationship between the two. And that's what social process theories are all about. The next type of theory that you focus on in this lesson deals specifically with interaction. And that's about how communicating with another person, how your interaction with another person will impact whether you are delinquent or not. So the people who you're around on a regular basis, what you're learning, how you're engaging in interaction, that's going to impact whether you are deviant or not. So two theories, social process, two frameworks, social process and interaction. That's what you focus on. So although there's so many different theoretical perspectives, you grasp this idea that these are two very important umbrellas and two very important ways that we explain why juveniles act up sometimes, why they don't listen, why they're violent, why they don't follow rules and regulations. That's what you have to understand about this lesson. Now, the umbrella has these, pieces to it, and some of the pieces overlap. So some of the theories that you talk about, a person will take a piece of one theory and then make a totally different theory. And that's what makes them confusing, and that's the reason why for this lesson you have a true-false quiz that is extra credit, and you have a writing assignment to do. Because when you start talking about social process theories that overlap in such a sophisticated way, multiple choice questions are only tricky. Now, I want to talk to you about the resources that you have available to you during this lesson because they're very important for your homework. You have 2 PowerPoint presentations, and then you have a couple YouTube videos that I want you to watch. The first PowerPoint presentation is all about our social process theories. So you have questions in your homework about differential association, matzah, and neutralization, and you notice that that was on your last exam. So I gave that to you on your last exam so that when we talked about it here, you would already be ready and it would be sort of a review. So you see how I do the exams. I put a little bit of what you had to study there, but then I put a couple pieces in for what is to come so that you all are prepared and you're doing a building block of knowledge. So some of you probably wonder, why were we tested on that before? Because I want to make sure that I'm pounding it into your head so that you know what those theories are all about. You need to know what drift is, you need to know what neutralization is, and I want to make sure that I give it to you more than one time. So that's why I do that way. Our control theories. Containment theory. If you want to contain someone, then you want to keep them safe from deviance. So whenever you see the term containment, we're going to try to keep people safe from something. We're going to try to contain, we're going to keep them in a specific type of environment. We're going to keep them around things that are healthy. We're going to have rules and regulations that keep them safe. So we're going to contain them. Think about that. Social control. Whenever you see the word social control, it's all about tightening the bond that you have with something. So although you think they're talking about controlling somebody, it's really about relationships. And when you develop tight relationships with people, then that's a bond that will pretty much keep you intact, keep you where you need to be. So you can have a nice bond with a good friend, and that good friend is going to school, that good friend is making positive choices, you have a healthy relationship with them, then you're less likely to become frustrated, you're less likely to be violent, you're more likely to follow a path that makes sense, a positive progression in life. You're more likely to do that. But social control is all about these bonds. Remember that. This is how we distinguish these different theories. General theory of crime. That's talking about self-control, but then opportunities that are available in the community. So, it's one thing to be able to make good choices. You can control yourself. But then there's another when, Ray's smoking dope, Uncle Johnny's making a marijuana stick. I'm just trying to tell you what you shouldn't do. If you have control over yourself, it's one thing. But if your environment entails all of these varieties of these same things that are going to push you into a different direction, that's a challenge. The general theory of crime is going to say we have to control ourselves, but at the same time, there are going to be conditions in our environment that may sometimes trick us into moving into a different direction or challenge us, so that it makes it really difficult for us to actually control ourselves. It's a relationship. Remember, we talked about rational choice theory and individual theory. Rational choice theory said we can weigh out and we can use rational choices, right. But they couldn't really understand why one individual would go down one path and another individual would go down another. But the general theory of crime is going to help us understand that. It's going to say, look, it's a relationship. There's a relationship between the individual who can or cannot control themselves, and then all of these different conditions that they're put in or that someone else puts them in, all these things that they see and they have access to. Are you going to act out crime? If you can't control yourself, maybe you still won't act out crime if you're in a positive environment, because there won't be as many opportunities for you to act up. Vice versa. There's a relationship. There could be a lack of self-control, or self-control, and then there could be a good or a bad environment. And depending on those two, depending on that continuum, who knows what's going to happen. But they're triggers. Things trigger. If you know someone doesn't have self-control, then you start thinking, what type of environment might you want to put them in to enhance their behavior? If there's a bad environment, I need to make sure that such and such has good self-control, because they have all these different things that they're seeing. So what I want to teach them in school is how to control themselves and how to be, how to be motivational, how to be powerful, how to be independent. We want to teach these particular skills to prevent them from engaging in whatever they might see on a regular basis. So using these different theories, you can think about how you want to interact with youth, how you engage them, and how you think critically about what will help them. You have an at-risk youth. How can you support them? What can you do to help them? That's what we have to think about. Those of you who are in this class right now, you may have an opportunity to work in a juvenile facility one day. All of these theories will come in handy, because all a theory is a thought process that you can use in order to address a challenge that you have. So you have all of these tools in this lesson to put into your toolbox so that you can think critically about all these different circumstances and think about how can you help this juvenile? How can you help them to think critically about their actions and what it is that they're doing? Now, we also have interaction theory. There are symbols in society. The self is the biggest symbol. Yourself. And we'll talk about this later, but when you talk about yourself, the main challenge that we have is how we see or how we understand ourselves, how we feel about ourselves. And sometimes we get that feeling, what other people think. It's called self-concept. How we feel about ourselves after reflecting upon what somebody else has to say about us. So I did think that my outfit was really nice today, but someone told me my scarf was ugly. So now I'm not as confident about my outfit as I was when I walked out of the door because someone insulted me. So now my attitude about myself has changed because of what somebody else had to say. And interaction theory, the communication that you have with other people and how that impacts your self-esteem, how you feel about yourself, how you see yourself in the world. You're an object. Self is an object. You're an object that just moves through society, and you interact with different people and interact with different things. And as you interact with people and things, you learn things and you change. You develop. Or, you get worse. And then last, social development model. And this is all about culture and social control. So culture is all about a way of life, how you interact with other people as a form of this way of life. And so if you're a part of a culture, then it's likely that other people around you are going to engage in similar behavior. And sometimes when we think about that similar behavior, we want to define some type of control where we can address the entire culture, not just one person, but we want to figure out how we can maintain control over a particular culture. It could be a gang. It could be just a group of children. So the next PowerPoint is all about your interaction theories. There are a few types. First, you have the labeling theories. You know, labels are symbolic, very symbolic. You can label someone in a way that you kick them out of a group. You can label them in a way that you force them into, a group. And then there are different types of labels that we'll talk about. Then you also have conflict theory, which also falls in that category. Those of you who have been in my class before, you know I love conflict theory. I love theories on power and control and authority. And theories on power, control, and authority. And see, what we have here is a dynamic between those who control the rules and those who are powerless to a certain extent. And we're talking about children. So when we're talking about power and control, we're talking about parents, we're talking about school teachers, we're talking about people who control the rules, and then these children who can only comply with the rules that are made available to them. So sometimes children are at risk just because of their parents, who their parents are. So you grow up in a home, you grow up at risk. You come out, hi, I'm at risk. You're born at risk because of your parents. And because of the rules and regulations, the way they understand the rules and regulations. So it's one thing to talk about conflict theory and talk about, adults and certain, ethnic groups or class groups and things like that. But when you start talking about children, somebody has to sign a permission slip until you're 18 years old. So think about that. Then we have our restorative justice and peacemaking theories. Those are about transforming people, transforming relationships. Now, if we want to restore a relationship, we may have a series of dialogues and different types of communications, because the point is that you want to look at that victim. You want to see what's happened to that victim, and you want to try to make things better for that particular victim. So you're going to take this person who's done something wrong, and you're going to try to help them understand why they did whatever they did and make things a lot better for the victim and their families. And then you talk about transformative programs like peacemaking. That's when you want to build stronger relationships. So you talk about peace that you want to have. We want to figure out what everybody's doing wrong in the situation. What everybody's doing wrong. And we want to bring us together to the table and try to resolve this particular conflict. That's why it's a conflict theory. Those of you who've taken a sociology class, you should understand that when you have conflict theory, your biggest theories, Karl Marx, Max Weber, you have a relationship between those who have power and those who do not. And it's not like functionalism where the consensus is majority rule. With conflict theory, the consensus is in the center. So everybody has to come together and everybody has to lose something. Everybody has to sacrifice something to meet a common goal. That's what transformative relationships are all about. That's what peacemaking is all about. Okay? That's what we're going to talk about. Ready? Let's go. Okay. I'm going right from home. Answers to homework. Straight up. Tom rolling. First, containment theory. So, reckless. Reckless, contain. Can you put that together? Reckless, contain. So whenever you see the name reckless, that's the person's name, Walter. Old Walter. Reckless, And then containment theory. Remember I told you, to contain something, that means you're going to try to keep them safe in some type of way. So there's some key concepts with containment theory. Here's the idea. The idea is that you have a sense of inner and outer forces that exist. You have inner, what's inside you, how you think, how you feel, how you respond, how you act. And then outside you have society and all those different things that are going on. Social process. Remember we talked about that? Yeah, social process. So what you have is an outer containment is just like a buffer that holds a person where they need to be. So I'm going to hold you where you need to be. I'm going to keep you in control. That's your outer containment. I'm going to hold you in bounds. We're going to have some social control methods that we're going to use to contain you. That's outside, not inside. So your physical self is going to be kept in control using this outer form of containment. So there's going to be some type of social rules. There's going to be something that's going to happen in society to maintain yourself, your sense of self. I'm going to keep you where you need to be. So we start thinking about containing people. I'm going to keep you in this safe neighborhood as opposed to you going in this unsafe place. I remember my grandmother saying to me, I said, Grandma, can I walk around the corner with Tasha? Can I walk around the corner with Tasha? She said, what's around the corner? I said, it's a street. We're just going to walk around the corner. And my grandmother said, well, if you're going to walk around the corner, you have to walk around the corner for something. You can't just walk around the corner. She said, find out what Tasha's walking around the corner with. About 2 years later, she came back with a baby. And I wasn't so disappointed that I couldn't go around the corner anymore. You know, I thought they were just walking around the corner. I didn't know they were making a pit stop somewhere. You know. She wanted to keep me on the porch because the porch was more safe than the street. Outer containment. You got it? Mm-hmm. Inner containment. Those are personal characteristics that you want to try to contain. So we want to teach youth. We want to teach our youth about certain attitudes, ways to understand things, positive motivation, self-esteem, be proud of who you are. Don't let people beat you up mentally, physically. Stay around people that make you feel good. This is a lesson for you too. So then you have these things called inner pushes. So the inner pushes about hostility, aggression, anger. Those are the things that push you outside of that inner containment mode. You know, what are you going to do if someone makes you really angry or frustrated? Is that anger or that frustration going to stop you from making a move that you would ordinarily make? Those are pushes. Feelings, emotions, pushes. You have it? Something that can push you outside of your mode of inner containment. Next, external pulls. So we can push you mentally outside of your inner containment, but we're going to pull you. Those girls were going to pull me off the porch around the corner. So those pulls are delinquent friends, deprivation, poverty, a lack of opportunity. So if you don't have opportunity, when that $100 is sitting here, that money, because of your deprivation, that money may pull you out of your outer containment zone. You understand containment theory? It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. Very simple. Tell me you don't know containment theory. Yeah? So, next. Ready? Labels. A label is used to characterize you as some type of person. So when you have a label, that label is going to have a character attached to it, feelings attached to it, position, hierarchy, rank attached to that particular label. Some labels can be helpful, and some labels can be hurtful. And sometimes when you think you're giving somebody a positive label, guess what happens? That label has an objective nature. So there's a such thing as an objective label. What happens when it's objective? That means that a person is going to react to that particular label. So you may be thinking you're giving someone a positive label, but when they react or respond to it, it may not feel or seem so positive. Somebody wants to talk to me. It's probably something really stupid. Funny. All right. So, objective labels have a direct outcome, a direct impact. That's why you know that it's objective. We talk about functionalism, we talk about how conservative it is, how it's a positivist theory. That means that there's an objective reality, 1 + 1 = 2. You need to know it's real, you need to know it's a fact. A label becomes truly real based upon this response or reaction that you get from it. So even when, say for instance, if somebody presents a label, the subjective version of that is just pretty much your interpretation when you deliver the message. So you can feel a certain way. You can say, she's so smart. She's so smart. But your cousin could be sitting next to you who's not so smart. And when somebody says, oh, you're so smart, that label can make you feel like you think you're better than somebody else. It can make you feel totally different. It can have a totally different meaning. The person who's saying it, she's so smart, they may think it's great. That's the subjective nature. The person who's delivering the message, they feel like they're delivering a specific message. Be careful what you say. Be careful of the context. Remember, when you're talking to somebody, when you're delivering a label, when you're saying somebody is like something, think about the situation. Think about how that person is going to react or respond to that label that you're presenting. Because it may not be a healthy statement, even though you think it is, because subjectively, you're delivering a message and you think that message is great. That's the subjective interpretation. First was objective, second is subjective. Next, inclusive labels. At this point, you want to make somebody feel like they're a part of something, So you want to say, you're so cool. You want to make somebody feel like they're part of the cool group. They're in, they're hip, they're popular, successful, intelligent, knowledgeable. Or the opposite. You're so lazy. Exclusive label, the last. Exact opposite. But remember with both, whether it's inclusive or exclusive being, rejecting somebody from something or making them feel like they're not a part of something, it's a social control method. It's a way that you use your interaction. It's a way that you use labeling. That's why labeling theory is a social interaction theory, right? It's a way that you use your words, you use language, you use your power, you use your status in order to control somebody or to put them in a particular position. Now, you may not always be able to place them in the position that you want because your labeling method is subjective. Only how they take it. The reaction is only the objective part, the process that is objective. How somebody actually takes it, how they interpret whatever it is that's happening. That's what's objective. But at the end of the day, you can do two things. You can either inclusively make somebody a part of something or exclusively take them out of a group. So know that you're doing that. Know that when you're using a label, that's a social control method. You're controlling somebody using your ability to speak and to use words. And you all do it every day. You just have to be mindful of how you do it and what it means. Because every time you talk about something or somebody, you're either putting them in a group or taking them out of a group. Inclusive or exclusive. And there's always a subjective interpretation that you have, and there's always an objective response. Think about this. I'm serious. Think about how you use labels and think about how your words make other people feel. Especially when we're talking about children, because that's what this class is about. Because you can label someone, and that one label could impact them for the rest of their lives. Depending on the power and the status that you have. when you're presenting whatever that label is. Do you see somebody and they're working with a child and they say, you never get this right. You never act properly. You get on my nerves. Those are labels. Theory of crime. I talked about this just a little. Remember? I was right here. Do you remember? You don't remember? Self-control, micro level. And then opportunities to create an outcome on the other side. So you have micro level and macro level. You have the individual, and then you have the structure. You have an individual who may or may not control themselves, and then you have the macro level structure. And that's the interaction that we're talking about. When we talked about labels, we were just talking about micro level interaction. We're talking about, one-on-one relationship between individuals, how labels can be presented, And labels can be presented about cultures and things like that, but we're talking about juvenile delinquency here. We're talking about how a label is presented and how you use that to label an individual. When we start talking about the general theory of crime, then it broadens a little bit. We're going to take it from micro relationships to macro. So self-control is a common factor. So if we believe somebody has problematic behavior, it's going to be because they're not able to control themselves. So that's the core idea. You have to be able to control yourself no matter what environment you're in. No matter what's going on, you have to be able to make sure that you can make valuable choices. Choices that are going to make a difference in your life. So life choices are going to determine the path that somebody's going to walk in their life. So if you do something wrong, whose fault is it? It's your fault. But you do have an environment that you have to interact in. We do take that into consideration, that there's an environment. So here's some things that we think about. First and foremost, with regards to self-control, we have this idea that somebody has an impulsive personality if they have low self-control. So an impulsive personality. So you're going to make choices without thinking. You're going to do the first thing that comes to mind. No interpretation between stimulus and response. Those of you who take my sociology class, you'll remember us talking about symbolic interactionism, and you'll remember this exercise where I talk about my daughter at a daycare, and the daycare worker leaves this windy door open on my daughter, and I have to think critically about what it is that I'm going to do. What choice am I going to make? Am I going to think impulsively and I'm in jail? Or am I going to think critically about what I have to do and make the choice that's going to lead to a positive outcome? So here I am in this situation, and if I have low self-control, my interpretation between stimulus and response, so my ability to interpret between whatever is happening and how you should respond, that means thinking. My ability to think is going to be off if I have low self-control. That was a lesson. That was like a hidden lesson for you. If you didn't get that, that was a hidden lesson. Think. If you take the time to think, your mind will take you back to a circumstance that occurred when you were 7 years old. Your mind remembers all of these little things that are happening, and each event that occurs in your life is going to trigger different circumstances and different ideas in your head if you give yourself a chance to think between the stimulus and the response. So if you have low self-control, then you probably engage in that impulsive behavior, impulsive personality. And I want you to help yourself. So if you know that you have an impulsive personality, then I want you to read a book about self-control. I want you to Google search, what do I need to do to enhance my self-control? So that you can make better choices. And when you're working with a child who has this impulsive behavior, then I want you to teach them about self-control so that they can make better choices, given the environment that they have to be in every day. Number 2, nonverbal tempered behavior. So, nonverbal communication, for those of you who've taken a communications class, that is the type of conduct where you don't say anything, but you make faces and you do things physically that make people feel uncomfortable. Some of you use nonverbal tempered behavior. If you don't like something, the first thing that your body does is you make a nasty face. You point. You suck the lemon. Mm-hmm. You look at people with your scrunched up lips, using all that energy, all that negative energy, you just all crabbed up. You roll your eyes at people. I used to be really good at that. Very disrespectful. Very disrespectful. Do you have control over that? Can you control your nonverbal communication? You're going to step into a professional environment where you want to be a manager, you want to be in charge of something, you want to develop things, you want to build and establish relationships. Handle your nonverbal communication. Learn to control your interactions that are nonverbal. It's not always just, bad if somebody says something nasty. It's sometimes how you handle your body that can show somebody that you are not able to control yourself. And some children, they don't know. It could be because they learned it from Ray or Uncle Johnny or Auntie or whomever. They could have learned it from somebody. But the point is that we teach them how to control this particular conduct because it can present a problem. But that's what they're talking about. Self-control, this micro-level idea of self-control and what we need to do to prepare these youth for these different conditions that they may encounter in life. But this stuff, all of these theories apply to juvenile delinquency, but they also apply to our everyday lives. Next, physical responses rather than mental. So if you punch somebody in the face after they say they don't like your scarf, as opposed to telling them, that wasn't very nice. Or if somebody says, I want you to do 10 more questions of homework. You slam your hand on the desk. Do you do these things? Children do these things, and so do adults. Sometimes the children learn it from their parents. Somebody says, you got to go outside. Somebody just hit your car and, you kick the trash can. Instead of thinking about how you need to handle the situation or what you need to do. Responses rather than mental responses. All right, number 4, risk-taking. Sometimes people don't understand that there's a consequence. You'll just quickly respond and you'll take whatever risk. You know why? Because a lot of times, depending on the situation that somebody's in, some folks are living day to day or hour to hour, moment by moment. They're not thinking critically about a 5-year plan. They don't have short-term and long-term goals. They're just trying to figure out how they can get through this situation. After I figure out how to get through this situation, then I'll figure out how to get bail. I get bailed out, figure out what I have to do next, She slapped my brother, so I'm going to have to punch her in the face after I look at her really nasty and not think critically about what I'm doing. Don't people do things like this every day? This is real business here. All right, number 5, short-sightedness. All right, short-sightedness, that's the same. You don't consider what's going to happen in the future. You're not taking things into consideration. Sometimes when you don't take things into consideration, it can be part of the rational choice process too, because sometimes you don't know how to take things into consideration. So some people are actually short-sighted, but it's nothing that they can do about it because they don't have a better idea. Nobody's given them the tools to put in their toolbox so that they actually know what to do next. You think, well, why didn't such and such do that? Well, it wasn't an option because they've been taught to think using a process that you would call short-sighted because they don't know what else to do. The number one option is to use physical behavior as opposed to mental behavior. Nobody ever taught them how to talk things out. So they just punch somebody in the face because that's what they know. So you have to try to teach them something. You have to teach them social control, self-control. You have to teach them how to control themselves so that they can make better choices the next time. Next, self-centered thinking. Do you only think about how this circumstance will impact you? Man. How many times have you made a choice and not thought about other people? I win. Everybody else loses. That's all right. If you have control over yourself, then that means that you're also thinking critically about the other people that are around you. Remember, what happens to you will impact the other people in your home, the other people in your community, the other people that you're interacting with and responding to on a regular basis. So when you make choices and those choices are self-centered and just about yourself, then you could get into trouble, or somebody else could get into trouble, or there could be some type of negative outcome. But when you combine that with all the other things that we talked about, you're in trouble. We're not saying that self-centered thinking is the major problem all by itself, but sometimes when you think about how all these different things interconnect and how they relate, then it becomes a bigger challenge. The more of these problems you have, the more difficult the situation might be, right? Because sometimes when you put two together, you get a monster. Restorative justice and peacemaking. I just want to give you a lot of examples of restorative justice and peacemaking. The idea here is that there's a dialogue between the victim and the person who committed the problem or the crime. Sometimes they have panels. So sometimes they'll have a panel, a discussion panel of folks who come in and they talk to the offender. The offender is the person who's committed the crime. They sit down and they talk to them. You know what you did? Do you know what type of impact this could have, on the community? And this panel has sort of like a top-down discussion. So think about it. When you're talking about restorative justice, it's not always this method where there's a dialogue between two. Sometimes you have authority figures who are here, and they're supposed to be mentors. They're supposed to be role models. They're supposed to be people who have something great to share. It could be stakeholders of the community. It could be somebody who's, who you hurt. The people that were impacted by whatever you did. The whole idea is we want to guilt you. We want you to feel sorry. We want you to feel ashamed for what it is that you've done. We want you to understand the consequences of your behavior. So we're going to put you in situations where you fully understand what it is that you've done. Because the whole idea is for the victim to receive justice. There should be some justice. And some people really believe in that. They feel that if somebody does something wrong, if you just throw them into jail, they're just going to sit in jail. That doesn't mean that they fully understand the consequences of what it is that they've done. So if we have a restorative justice program, you may still have to serve some time, but we're going to create some type of system where you truly understand what it is that you've actually done. Another thing that they do are sentencing circles, where they have a group of people together, like a study circle, where you facilitate a conversation and you talk about what it is that's been done wrong and why it's done wrong. Sometimes they have intervention programs. You'll see these types of programs where the juvenile is at a home and then some maybe surrogate victim, maybe not the actual victim, maybe someone who's posing as the victim or somebody who's, showing that this person did something wrong, a relative of the victim, if the victim was murdered or killed or something, a relative or somebody that the victim knows, and they'll have to come in and they'll have to have these conversations with the person who did something wrong. This dialogue, this ongoing dialogue that occurs. Maybe they have some type of program where they talk to them about, drug use or drug abuse and how, how being involved in this type of setting can impact your life or whatever it is that you do. Sometimes they have family group counseling or conferences where they have your mom or your uncle or your dad or someone come in and dialogue with you, talk to you about what it is that you've done wrong. Again, these are all different methods that you all can think critically about. Do you want the victim to feel better about what's going on? Do you want a one-on-one or hands-on method that's being used with a child? Now, you may not believe in restorative justice for an adult, but what about an 11-year-old who's done something wrong? What about a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old? You want them to truly understand full circle what it is that they've done and think critically about how you can try to change their behavior and have them so guilty that they never do it again. Because at some point, they may enter the general population again. And they have to understand. Most people do things and they really don't understand why they've done it. They responded quickly or, out of anger. Right, the pushes. We can apply another theory. Y'all remember the pushes, right? Yeah. Now we're really learning something. We can apply something here. All right. So do you all understand restorative justice? There's a video. You should watch the video. We'll give you, hands-on. All the videos are pretty short, 5 or 6 minutes, something like that. But take a look at it. It's a homework question. Peacemaking. Restorative justice is about restoring the relationship between the victim and the person who did something wrong. Peacemaking is about transforming a relationship, so taking something to another level. So it's sometimes perceived of as a step beyond restoration if you can get people together and have a conflict resolution occurring. Sometimes people talk about ethics, how somebody's behavior is ethical. We want to talk about that. So what is ethical as compared to unethical conduct that we have people engaging in here? What are the things that we did wrong? What could we have done better? That's always something critical to think about. Remember at the beginning of class, I said the situation could have been exercised better. So it's not always about just thinking, oh, I'm right, everything that I do is right. You get into a room with somebody and something's happened and people think critically about what could have been done to improve the situation. So what could we have done, both of us, to make this situation better? And how do we handle situations where we're interacting and engaging each other in the future? This is some good relationship stuff here. If you have a problem in your relationship, you can't just have somebody saying, you did this wrong, you, because y'all gotta wake up and hang out tomorrow. If you have to engage with somebody on a regular basis, you have to sit together, use a peacekeeping model, and think critically about what everybody can do better, because everybody can do better. You can always do better. No matter what you're doing, there's always something that you can do better. You got a 100 on that test, so what? I bet you there's something that you could have done better, because maybe you guessed on question number 2. There's always a way that you can enhance or improve your interaction with other people. And if you think like that on a regular basis, if you think about that with the people who you have relationships with, okay, every day in this marriage, I want to figure out how I can make myself better and how I can make this relationship better. If both people are thinking like that, by developing that type of relationship, you develop that. If you're thinking about that, it's peacekeeping. That's how you do it. It's just a process. It doesn't work for everybody. Just like this model doesn't work for every criminal. But it's a method. It's a possibility. It's something that you can use for juvenile delinquency, but it's something you can use tonight when you get home. Try it. They might like it. And even if you have the best situation in the world, guess what? You can always be better. Absolutely, you can always be better. You can always improve yourself. No matter how great you think you are, you can always be better. All right. Differential association. This is one of my absolute favorite theories because it's all about learned behavior. So I can always say, oh, well, you know, I did that because of my mom. That's her fault. You know, it was because of my dad. I learned what not to do. You know, I can blame somebody because I'm doing this because I'm mocking, I'm mimicking the behavior that I see. So behavior is learned. That's what they're talking about with differential association. I'm learning to be deviant. I'm learning to make bad choices. Here are the 7 propositions. First, behavior is acquired. It is not inherited. So it is acquired. You get it from somebody. You watch, you learn, you take it from somebody. You weren't born that way. You learn that behavior. So all these biological studies that say, oh, you know, this person is a criminal because of their parents. No, you weren't born that way. You learned that by watching them. The first thing mama said to you was, hi, and you said, hi. You didn't say, hello, my dear. How are you? You said, hi. That's what you learned. Social learning. You learned that by, you know, watching, by interacting. Number 2, your involvement has to be active. Active involvement with somebody in order to learn. Active involvement. So there has to be some type of interaction that is going on or that is occurring in order for us to learn. It's a process of communication. I have to communicate with you in order to learn something from you. I have to interact with you in order to learn something from you. Daddy ain't there. You're not learning nothing from Daddy. He ain't there. Number 3. Intimate personal groups. People learn in intimate personal groups. The most information that you'll gain through differential association is through intimate groups. Not intimate like sexual. Intimate means that you're developing a strong, positive or negative relationship with somebody. Next, when you learn something, there's a mindset or a rationale that goes along with that learning. So, a child, for instance, if there's just a symbol, like, per se, a middle finger. Okay, I want you to be perfect. The child is not just going to learn this motion. They're going to know why they're doing it. So they're going to understand the principles that are involved with the action. They're not just going to learn a symbol. It says when a criminal behavior is learned, the learning includes techniques of committing crime. Techniques of committing crime. There's a specific direction. There's a specific drive, feeling, emotion about it. There's a motivation. And there's an attitude. A certain attitude. Because when you flip the finger, there's an attitude. You know? And number 5, there's a specific definition. There's a definition or some type of law or some type of code about what it is that somebody's doing. So there's something in society that helps us to understand what behavior is favorable or unfavorable. It's not about the attitude that somebody has is different. It's different from the attitude. It's this idea that there's a label placed on the behavior. There's some type of code of conduct that exists in society where whatever it is that you've learned, it's in a context. It's within a box where people already know whether it's good or bad. Now, whether you like it or not, it's a total difference. So there's a rule. Number 6. How people learn, it varies. You know, it varies. You can have 2 children in a family, and one child may follow the footsteps of their parents. They may do everything. They may model. They may mimic the parents. They may do exactly what that parent is doing. But another child, they may be totally oblivious to what's going on. They have no idea. They just do other things, you know. Mom and dad, they got a whole drug hustle going on. And the kids are just happy to have Barbie dolls. They have no idea what's going on, even though they see it every day. They don't know what it means. They don't understand. They're not learning to do it. They just know something's happening, but they're not paying attention to that. They're not concentrating on that. They're focused on the money. They're focused on the Barbie dolls. They're focused on, you know, the G.I. Joe or the Transformers. You know, they're focused on those things, not on the action that's going on. So there could be behavior to be learned, but that doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's going to learn that behavior. Learning varies. Everyone's different. Somebody's learning something in class right now. Somebody else, they're thinking about dinner. There's nothing I can do about that. All I can do is give you a lecture. Number 7, there are always different motives for delinquent behavior. All these different motives. A motive is your justification for what you do. The justification, the reason why you do it. So the kid could learn to do something, but you're never going to know when they're going to do it or why they're going to do it. You just got to watch out. You teach someone something, you don't know when it's going to happen again. You don't know how they're going to use it. You don't know what's going to motivate them. Everybody has a different sense of motive because everybody has a different set of feelings. So even though you teach somebody something, you can't control how they feel. Does everybody understand that? You can teach something. You can teach somebody. I can teach you all of this information. You can use this and go rob a bank, or you can use it to go help children. I don't know what your motives are. You know, I don't know what you're going to do. I don't know how you're going to feel about something. I don't know how you're going to use what it is that I'm giving you. I just know I'm doing my best to give you something. I'm hoping that you learn something. I'm hoping that I have an expectation for you to make good choices and for